Hello, this is Karen from CreativeJewelryMaking.com, and today I'm going to show you how to make one of these very special ear wires. And what makes them special is this dot of silver on the end. What we're going to do is we're actually going to melt that, and that's going to add some interest to the ear wire and just a nice unique touch. You're going to need 18 gauge fine silver. Now you can use sterling silver, but what's going to happen when you heat that sterling silver with the torch, you're going to get fire scale, which means you're going to have to take a separate step or another step and put that in a pickling solution if you want to get that shine back on the silver. The equipment that you're going to need is a torch, and you can use actually a creme brulee torch from your kitchen. You're going to need a fire protective surface. We are going to be working with the flame, so you want to make sure that you're in a safe place and that you're also wearing your eye goggles. I have here a pumice block. I have a third hand, which is very convenient. This makes it much easier to make these. The advantage to this setup is, and I learned this from Ann Mitchell, is that you use the benefit of gravity. So when you heat this wire and you ball up the silver, you're going to get a nice ball of silver on the bottom that's even because it's perpendicular to the surface. The other equipment that you're going to need are some snippers or wire cutters to cut your silver. You're going to need round nose pliers. You might need some chain nose or regular pliers depending on what you might need to do afterwards once you've shaped it, just to get it looking exactly the way you want it. This is a handy tool to have. This has like a nylon coating, and it enables you to straighten out your wire if it's kind of kinked up before you use it. You're also going to need a file, because at the end we want to make sure that there's no sharp edges on the ear wire. You're going to need either a rubber block or a metal pounding block. The rubber block is used if you're just going to work hard in the ear wire. The metal is used if you're going to flatten out the wire a little bit more to add some more texture or interest to the ear wire. You're also going to need a ruler, and I usually have my wire gauge handy as well. This helps me make sure that I'm using the right gauge wire. And I also have here a hammer, and you can see the flat side could be used for flattening the wire some more, or I could even add some texture if I wanted to the ear wire, although that's not quite as common. And I also have my rawhide hammer, which is used for work hardening the wire. So the setup that I have here is, you can see that I have the third hand here. I have a bowl of water underneath, and that's going to be used to quench the silver. It also is protective in case something happens with the wire and it falls off of the third hand. I've cut a 1 3/4 inch piece of 18 gauge fine silver wire. I'm going to turn on my torch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up and down this wire with the flame. Now, the reason I do that is it works much better than if you just try to point the flame down at the bottom of the wire. It just works much better to get this whole thing heated up. And once it's glowing, then you take the flame and you use that down at the bottom to kind of shape the ball once it gets nice and hot. So it's glowing here. You probably can't see that, but you can trust me that it's glowing kind of a cherry red. I'm now using the flame underneath to kind of shape this ball to get it to ball up into a nice ball that will, add that interest to the wire piece. Now once I've got that ball of silver on the end, I'm going to quench it, and you want to put your third hand in the water as well, because it's going to be hot and you don't want to get burned. So I've now quenched that. I'm going to take this off of the third hand, and what you can do is you could make another one of these right now, and that's probably the best thing to do, because if you make another one, then you can actually bend these both at the same time. But for the purpose of time, I'm just going to actually bend one. And I'm going to take my round nose plier and I am going to turn that over, just over the tip, and it makes, I'm going to make almost like a little, what looks to be kind of like a candy cane. Do you see that there? And then I'm going to take my handy dandy ballpoint pen and I'm going to take that top of the, it's called a candy cane, and I'm going to put that against the pen, and then I'm going to wrap the wire around the pen. And like I was saying, if you had two of these done, you could put them right next to each other so that you would be wrapping them together side by side at the exact same time. That would just help them to be that much more even. So now I've wrapped that around the pen, and as I mentioned before, you could also use a Sharpie for this if you wanted to have a bigger, a rounder loop. Now I still have this kind of boring straight line here on the end. So what I'm going to do to give it a little bit more of a nice curve here is I'm going to take my round nose, and now I'm using the bottom part of the round nose, and which is thicker, and I'm going to give it just a little bit of a curve here. Now see how nice that looks, just adding that little bit more of a curve. It just looks that much more like an ear wire. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to file this. Now when you file, you want to file in one direction. Some people want to go back and forth like this. You're actually only going to be effective in one direction. That's how files are designed. So you're going to file the rough edges off the bottom here, and once you're comfortable that you feel like you've got that nice and smooth, now you could just stop here. You could use this as is. You could also, as I mentioned earlier, you could get out your metal pounding block here, and you could get your hammer, and you could just put like a little flat edge on the end here. So like I'm going to take the hammer, and notice how when I hammer, I'm kind of pushing in the direction that I want the metal to flatten. So it's a very conscious approach here to how I want to get this ear wire to flatten. And then I turn it over and do just a little bit more, and I'm happy with that now. Now as a result of the hammering, you can see it got bent out of shape a little bit, so now all I'm going to do is kind of push that back in place. And then the last step is to take my rubber block here, and I'm going to take a rawhide hammer and just tap it a couple times to work hard in it. Now I actually don't need to use a rubber block. I could actually use the metal block. That's fine as well. So I'm just gonna, it doesn't take much to work hard in it. So there you go. Now our ear wire is done. The last thing that I wanted to tell you was I used 1 3/4 inches, and this is the size that I ended up with. Now if you were using your Sharpie pen, you'd probably want to cut more like 2 inches, or if you wanted to end up with more of a long tail here to add some more elegance, then you'd probably want to cut a longer piece of wire as well. But this is what the 1 3/4 inch, and you can see this is a pretty standard size. So I hope that you enjoyed this demonstration and that you have fun making your own ear wires. It's always very satisfying if you can say that you made the entire piece yourself, including the ear wires. So have a great day and happy jewelry making.